In preparing for the elections, the Cleen Foundation conducted 3 different surveys with a view to assessing the potential for electoral violence. And the idea is that those knowledge at the various stages before the election can help different agencies and organizations to make decisions. For example, it will help the INEC to improve on its logistics, identify areas that could trigger electoral violence. For the security agencies also, it was to provide them with the understanding of the sort of activities, actions, and decisions that could also create violence. And then, of course, even which states are more vulnerable to electoral violence. So different aspects of preparation for election were captured in the instrument, which was developed by the Electoral Institute of the INEC and the Cleen Foundation, and reviewed in 2016 and reviewed in 2018. The first election survey was conducted in April and May of 2018, and it had a sample size of 5,000. They were selected from 12 states, and that's 2 states per geopolitical zone. The second one was also conducted in 2018, and in between the 10th and 24th of October. That covered the entire country. That's means the 36 states and the federal capital. It had a sample size of 11,219. These 2 were conducted in 2018. The first one, generally one can regard as a very large pilot survey, but was also a quick, some kind of a rapid assessment as we move towards the election, because that was conducted in about 7 months to 8 months to the election. The second one was conducted 4 months to the election in October. And the last one, which was also a national survey with a sample size of 11,421, was conducted in January, barely 6 weeks to the general elections. They provide very interesting pattern which were disseminated. Each of these surveys were disseminated at the conclusion of the report, because, as we said, it was not an academic thing. Today is just to give you something to hold as a lesson learned from the election. The primary purpose was to provide knowledge before the election as a way of solving problems. It was a problem-solving survey. And so as they were concluded, they were presented to the relevant stakeholders, and then the implication of the findings were discussed so that necessary measures could be taken to mitigate trigger factors. So we had the last one. I think the dissemination actually took place in the first week of February 2019, which was the month of the election. The key findings were organized along various factors. For example, we asked several questions asked with respect to whether the respondents agree or disagree as to sources of violence during the election. And a number of decisions, actions were identified. The first set of information were that improper conduct and actions of security agencies, Independent National Electoral Commission, the media, politicians, and judiciary were likely to be triggers for election. And if you look at it, these are important stakeholders, security agencies. Without security, there can be no democratic elections. And so the debate about deployment of security officials during election is neither here or there. It depends on your stage of development. In some cases, election has become like withdrawing money from ATM. in many advanced countries, that's the way it happens. It's like going to withdraw money from ATM. You go there at your own time during the election, during the day from your office, and you punch in your preferences and you go back to your work. It's like withdrawing money from, but we have not reached that stage. So we are in a stage where election is conducted as if it is a warfare. The reasons for this, of course, is not far-fetched. We still have a situation where politics is an industry for, unfortunately, our elites who are not productive. So you find somebody, you say, I'm a politician. You don't have an occupation, you are a politician. It's only in Nigeria you find people whose occupation is that they are politicians. Every other person had. Obama has, whether he has a chamber from where he became a senator and became a president. He's gone back to earning money through those processes that were suspended during his presidency. Now he must be earning big money from, so he only takes back his presidential goodwill to his farm in order to earn money. But in our case, when people become big man, if they come to Abuja, they never return to their state. They would rather hang around in Abuja as rumor mongers. So what is happening in this office? Who is happening to this minister? Who is happening in these agencies? So as long as we have this, the desperation to be in office will continue. And it's not new. This was noticed as far back as the first set of election in 1963, that money, business, there's no business like politics in Nigeria. So it's then important that the way we manage security during election is very important. And although we concentrate on election security at the poll, of course, from registration right through to voter registration through the entire process, security is important, because without it, you will not have any, it will be dominated or captured by some people. But it's also important that the security agencies themselves conduct their actions in a way that is in congruence with democratic ethos, with democratic culture. So that is the dilemma. Security obviously is essential, it's a requisite, but the security officials' conduct must also be in congruence with democratic norms. Of course, the Independent Electoral Commission is the umpire over the election. And for them, a number of their decisions or inactions can cause electoral violence. And as we will see later, we will see that inefficiency of operations of INEC may often be the trigger for elections. Then people talked about the media. And, in 2015, 2019, I think the role of media in whether you call it hate speeches or short reporting fake news and the rest of them assume new dimensions. And therefore, the public identify them as major, their conduct as a major source, possible source. And they talk about politicians and judiciary. Nigerian politicians are the smartest, in quote. After each election, they blame everybody except themselves. So immediately after the 2019 elections, who were the one blamed? Security officials and INEC. But who were the one who gave bribes? Who were the one who recruited thugs? Who were the one who, in fact, compromised the people they were blaming? Who compromised security? Who compromised judiciary? But they stood out as the victim, blaming everybody. But the population was not, deceived. They identified their conduct as a major trigger of a possible trigger of election. We also try to ask in terms of what is specific conduct that may be involved. Partiality of security agents and INEC came quite prominent as part of it. Aggressive and excessive use of force by security agency, misinformation of the public by media, including their partisanship, and then favoritism for particular parties or politicians were identified. Other factors identified were poor training and low professionalism of security agencies. Again, one of the challenges we've had since 1999 is the use of a variety of uniform agencies for election. I recall in 1999, That was when I think out of frustration we didn't know what to do. We were now I was then with MAMSA, and we were looking for how to constitute this. It was then we brought in prisons, custom, anybody who wore uniform and had training, discipline, in the discipline forces. And this create problem because while very often you try to give resources, capacity building for for some of the agencies, you don't do that for some of the agencies, and on the same day you mobilize them, and they don't come under the same command. And these are the challenges that you have many forces out there with different commanders, and different rules of engagement. And these are challenges for our subsequent election that we need to learn. First, for more socialization of Nigeria, that election is not warfare. And then, of course, we need less security agencies presence in order to conduct fair and fair election. How soon, that depends on you and I, the choices that we make. The cover here is not Holy Communion. If you're a Christian, on Sunday when you see a table cover like this, you are going to have Holy Communion. It's not Holy Communion. This is a report of the series of surveys conducted regarding electoral, violence triggers in 2019, and it's our wish to present it to the public. The ideas contained in the report are solely those of Cleen Foundation. It has nothing to do. In fact, I think the funders, partners who supported it, are seeing this report for the first time. So if a politician and you are not happy, our address is at the back of the publication. Reach out for us, and as a matter of accountability, we are obliged for you to engage you if you feel dissatisfied, so you can reach us. So we can just help unveil it, and so that it becomes a public document.
Copies of the report will go right round.
Please be able to get assessments and we conduct it.
I welcome you all to the public presentation of the report of the 2019 general elections in Nigeria by the Cleen Foundation. The Cleen Foundation, formerly known as Center for Law Enforcement Education, is a non-governmental organization established in January 1998 with the mission of promoting public safety, security, and accessible justice through the strategies of empirical research, legislative advocacy, demonstration programs, and publications in partnership with government, civil society, and the private sector. The 2019 general election is significant in several aspects. First, it was the first general election under the ruling All Progressive Congress Party in Nigeria. Second, the elections were conducted under a new leadership of the Independent National Electoral Commission with Professor Mahmoud Yakubu as the chair of the commission. I also think at that period in time, we also had a new Inspector General of Police, Mohammed Abubakar. So we had several news and several firsts. The elections featured an unprecedented high number of political parties, totaling 91 registered political parties and 73 presidential candidates. Antecedents in the build-up to the 2019 general election saw a politically charged environment, particularly between the two leading political parties, that is the All Progressive Congress and the People Democratic Party of Nigeria. The situation was further compounded by a tense security environment occasioned by security threats across the country ahead of the general elections. Hinged on this backdrop, Cleen Foundation carried out a study designed to assess the threats posed by different actors connected to the elections. The research work was carried out in 3 batches, with all addressing the issue of security threats associated with the election in Nigeria. Therefore, The study explored the perception of the general public on what they identify to be a threat to the election. The goal was to generate empirical evidence on threats to the process of the election and also to help proffer recommendations to the key stakeholders on how best to mitigate a negative upsurge in the process of the election. Recommendations from the study were targeted at different stakeholders in order to achieve free, fair, and peaceful elections in Nigeria. Thereafter, the Cleen Foundation engaged in election observation across the 774 local government areas in Nigeria as an INEC accredited observer. I guess the report of the consolidated security threat assessment is what Prof presented a summary, and you can find that on the Blue Book, Record Security Threat Assessment for 2019 General Elections in Nigeria, consolidated report. Now for the election itself, we had a methodology. The methodology is that Cleen Foundation deployed its duly accredited 1,600 observers across the 774 local governments in Nigeria to observe the elections. Specifically, they were tasked with the mandate to observe the conduct of security personnel whilst on election duty and to provide live reports using a checklist that incorporates provisions in the Code of Conduct developed in collaboration with the Police Service Commission. The foundation hosted Election Security Support Center across its offices, and also here in Hilton. I can still see some of our media colleagues that always visited us whenever we had any press release to do, and we actually thank you for supporting us. So the foundation hosted election security support centers across its offices to support real-time analysis of election-related reports from the field. In deploying technology to enhance the analysis of the field reports, Cleen deployed the Taylor application developed by Horizontal, which is a data gathering and analysis mobile application which saved time and minimized error due to data entry. And that's what I was talking about that should be showing on the screen that is by my left. The qualitative information and empirical data were complemented with information from state coordinators across the country, and they provided periodic feedback to the Election Security Support Center through phone calls and dedicated social media platforms such as WhatsApp, Twitter, and Facebook. One thing we also need to point out about the methodology is that we didn't have our observers in almost 120,000 polling units. So the report we are making is restricted, if I may say that, to the polling units where our observers are observed. We had observers in the 774 local governments, but we didn't have observers in all the polling units. And I guess that is one thing we have to pinpoint. But also the issue in statistics and also in data gathering, I normally ask people, if you have malaria and you go to the hospital and you want them to treat you for malaria, do they actually draw up all the blood in your system for them to tell you that you have malaria? What do? They just take a sample and put it through some data analysis, and they tell you you have 1+ or 2+, right? So also in data collection, once the demographics are correct, you can actually use a sample size to project what happens in almost all the polling units that we observed the elections. But for the purposes of clarity, like I earlier on said, we had observers in the 774 local governments, but they were only 1,600 observers, and we didn't cover the 120+ polling units. So what are our key findings? 1, election-related killings. The general election witnessed deaths across some states during the presidential election, such as Rivers State, Akwa Ibom, Ebonyi, Kogi, and Zamfara states. The governorship elections also recorded killings in Rivers, Kogi, Imo, Akwa Ibom, Oyo, Ebonyi, Benue, and Enugu states. 5 persons were reportedly killed in the same locations in Kana local government, and 1 person in Ahoda West local government area, both of Rivers State, while in Benue, Kogi, and Katsina states recorded 2 deaths per state. The supplementary elections further compounded the scale of deaths with special focus on Kano and Benue states. Elsewhere, Our observers reported cases of deaths of voters allegedly perpetrated at the instances of political thugs and other unidentified criminals. These incidents and related discussions on election violence shows the need for lasting electoral reform and incorporate the use of technology and reduce contact amongst the electorates. We had a hackathon, I think that was in 2017 or early 2018, where the youth actually came up with the idea that the best way to hold elections in Nigeria is through electronic technology, and that if we make it possible for people to vote from the comfort of their homes, that it will be possible for us to have a higher number of voters than what we have now. And of course, the recent Big Brother Nigeria thing also showed that more Nigerians are interested in staying at their home and voting than coming out. I think it's something that we should be looking at even as we go towards the elections. Of course, there are challenges. Everybody will agree with that, that technology has its own challenges. And we know that in some of our localities, there's actually no electricity or internet connection and all those things. But where there is a will, there is always a way. Two is the issue of voter trading. The sheer scale of vote trading in the 2019 general elections has resumed an alarming trend. The 2019 general elections witnessed massive incidences of vote trading observed in most states across the regions of the country. For the governorship elections, Cleen observed incidents of vote trading in states such as Ekiti, Lagos, Ebonyi, Enugu, Niger, Benue, Imo, Kwara, Kogi, and Katsina states. While for the presidential election, it was witnessed in states like Kogi and Akwa Ibom states. And with their states, that almost all the political parties were involved in vote trading, vote buying and selling, and that it was not restricted to one political party. So it's something that we really need to work. The big question we need to ask ourselves, what is the cost of the vote of a Nigerian? Is it 500? Because at a point it was reduced to 500. Is it 2,000? Is it 5,000? Is it a bag of salt? Is it a bag of rice, local or foreign? Is it a bag of beans? I think it's something we really need to ask ourselves. What is the worth of the vote of an average Nigerian? Number three, logistics and operational challenges of INEC. The 2019 general election witnessed logistic challenges related to the late arrival of INEC officials at their duty stations, with many voters on ground awaiting the arrival of INEC officials. Additionally, there were recurring cases of the card readouts malfunctioning in most parts of the country. Although there was a slight improvement in the governorship election, these factors on their own created challenges in the ballot process, as some presiding officers resorted to the use of manual accreditation. In some instances, however, responses to calls from observers and civil society groups by INEC on the need for replacement of the card readers were achieved in different parts of the country. 4, military involvement. The elections were characterized by heavy military deployment across the country, bordering on alleged professional misconduct involving the military with regards to the incidences that involved the obstruction of electorates from polling units and some collection centers as seen in Rivers State. Even though during that period, the military issued a press release that the individuals who we had seen on television and even reported by observers were not their personnel. But there was another big question. If during a very sensitive election, people who are not official security agencies will be masquerading with the camouflage of our security personnel, it poses another security threat actually for the country. And we actually, during that period, also informed the public about the need for us to secure our elections. Their presence was also heavily felt across the South-South, South-East, North-Central, including during the supplementary elections. Despite the position of the laws, codes of conduct, and policies on this matter, the outcome of the 2019 general elections is indicative of the need to reflect and debate constructively on the role of the military in our elections. Section 29.3 of the Electoral Act clearly points out that the military can be involved in elections. But it says that there are 3 key things they need to do, and it should actually be done in collaboration with other security agencies, because we know that the law clearly says that the Nigerian police force has that primary responsibility and should lead the charge. That is the protection of materials and the provision, also the protection of INEC officials and other officials involved in the election, and also the protection of materials, whether they are being moved to INEC headquarters or they are being moved to places where the elections the results will be counted on all those things. So the responsibility of security agencies as far as the Electoral Commission is concerned is to aid civil authority, and that is very clear. But one of the things that happened during the election is that we also know that there are almost 36 military deployments in the 36 states of the Federation. So when we reached out to the military to say, what are your rules of engagement, they actually sent us a code of conduct for security personnel, especially the armed forces detail. And we also informed in one of the forums that was organized that because we have election, the military will not withdraw their personnel that were on active duty because of the deployment that was already going on. So the argument is that some of the people you saw were already there before the elections, and we cannot withdraw them because the elections are taking place, because also of the reality that we have security challenges.